every 2 hours. Like clockwork, like breathing, like a ritual that kept death at bay. For 20 years, Bela Lugosi carried a secret that would have shattered his career into 1,000 pieces. Every 2 hours, a needle pierced his flesh, just to keep standing, just to keep the cameras rolling, just to survive another day in the merciless machine of Hollywood. He smuggled a full pound of drugs across an ocean, hidden in a box like contraband treasure. His body, once a powerful 180 pounds of European elegance, withered down to a skeletal 125. And when there were no more veins left to find, no more untouched flesh to puncture, when his body finally refused to cooperate, he lay in a hospital bed at age 72 and confessed everything. Hollywood never saw it coming. The press never suspected. Behind the velvet curtains and closed doors, a completely different story was unfolding, one that would make his darkest film roles look like fairy tales. October 20, 1882. Lugos, Hungary. A child entered the world under the weight of Catholic tradition and unforgiving expectations. Bela Lugosi, the youngest of 4 children, was born into a household where rules weren't suggestions, they were commandments. His father climbed from the flour-dusted world of baking into the cold calculations of banking. His mother carried Serbian blood that ran through the family like a river of discipline and old-world tradition. But young Bela felt the walls closing in. By 12 years old, he couldn't breathe in that house anymore. School felt like a prison. Home felt like a cage. So he did what few children dared. He walked away from all of it. No dramatic goodbye, no note left behind. Just a boy choosing the uncertainty of the streets over the suffocation of expectations. He worked with his hands, odd jobs, manual labor, coins that barely kept hunger away. Then came the news that changed everything. His father was dead. The words reached him like a blade of ice cutting through fog, making everything in his life sharper, colder, more real. That early severance from family planted something deep inside him, a fierce, almost violent independence. He would bow to no one. He would build his own empire brick by bloody brick. That stubborn self-reliance would later fuel both his radical politics and his unshakable determination to carve out a career on his own terms, no matter the cost. Acting found him in 1902, when he was barely 20 years old. The provincial stages of Hungary opened their arms, and he stepped through, hungry for something he couldn't yet name. His first recorded role came on August 24, 1902. Oxque Brigadeiros, the beginning of everything. The years blurred together as he accumulated more than 170 productions. Most of the time his name sat buried in the credits, far from the spotlight he craved. But he climbed anyway, one role at a time, one performance bleeding into the next. By his late teens, he was carrying Shakespeare across the vast expanse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, The Taming of the Shrew. He became these characters, lived inside their skins, spoke their words with a conviction that made audiences forget he had no formal training. Theater insiders whispered about the young man with no pedigree who somehow commanded stages with raw magnetism. Audiences felt something genuine when he moved, when he spoke, when he merely stood still and let silence hang in the air. This wasn't technique learned in expensive academies. This was something else, something real, something dangerous. By 1911, Budapest called to him like a siren song. 2 years later, he breached the walls of the National Theatre and remained there until 1919. Later, he would claim he had been the leading actor, the star everyone came to see. Records told a different story. He spent most of those years in supporting roles, orbiting the spotlight but never quite reaching its center. But here's what the records couldn't capture. He worked constantly, relentlessly, without pause. In 1916, something extraordinary happened. He portrayed Jesus Christ in a passion play in Debrecen, one of the rare moments when the weight of an entire production rested solely on his shoulders. He moved from comedy to tragedy without missing a beat, taking whatever role they threw at him. Each year, Dozens of new characters, each character another layer of experience. Even if he wasn't the star he desperately wanted to be, he was becoming something more valuable, a craftsman who understood the invisible architecture of performance. Then Hungarian silent films opened a new door. Between 1917 and 1918, he appeared in 12 films under a pseudonym, Untold, a separate identity for this new medium. His earliest project was The Leopard in 1917. In 1921 came Dracula Halala, a film most historians believe is now lost to time. Newspaper advertisements from April 1918 confirmed his pseudonym, proving something crucial. Decades before Hollywood made branding an art form, Lugosi already understood the power of controlling his image. This wasn't luck. This was calculation. This was a man who knew exactly what he was building, even if the world hadn't caught up yet. August 1914, the world caught fire. Lugosi volunteered for the 43rd Royal Hungarian Infantry Regiment. His discipline and natural leadership caught immediate attention, and soon he was promoted to infantry lieutenant. Then came the selection that would define him, chosen for an elite ski patrol on the Carpathian front. The winter campaign of 1915 was a meat grinder that devoured lives at a horrifying pace. More than half of the 1,100,000 Austro-Hungarian troops deployed in the first 4 months were killed, wounded, captured, or consumed by disease. Temperatures plunged to 20 below zero. Entire companies froze in place, becoming ice sculptures of men who never made it home. Lugosi survived partly because the ski patrol received superior gear. And in that frozen hell, better gear meant the difference between breathing and becoming another corpse buried under snow. He served 16 to 18 months. Each day felt like a year. The Eastern Front wounded him 3 times, each injury carved deeper than the last. The first wound came near Rohatyn in 1915, when Austro-Hungarian forces collided with Russian troops in savage combat. He recovered. He returned. Then came a massive offensive supported by an artillery barrage of more than 750,000 shells, a storm of metal and fire that tore through everything in its path. That campaign brought his second wound. The injuries triggered chronic sciatic neuritis, pain that would torment him for the rest of his life. By the mid-1930s, the agony became unbearable. Doctors prescribed morphine and methadone. What began as legitimate medical treatment slowly, insidiously transformed into something darker. An addiction that would weaken the foundation of his Hollywood career until, 20 years later, he finally entered treatment in April 1955 at age 72. But the worst wound wasn't physical. During a Russian attack, a trench collapsed. He found himself trapped beneath the bodies of his fallen comrades. Motionless, barely breathing, as enemy boots marched over his living grave. He rarely spoke about that night. When he did, the memory carried a weight that words struggled to hold. That moment shattered his mental stability and led directly to his discharge in 1916. The experience carved something permanent inside him, something audiences would later feel radiating from his darkest performances, especially in roles soaked in torment and fear. There was another story from this period, one even more disturbing. Lugosi claimed he served as an executioner for the Austro-Hungarian army. In interviews, he described feeling both thrilled and guilty after carrying out executions. Historians still debate whether these accounts were true or wartime trauma reshaping memory into something else. But the emotional mixture he described, that volatile blend of excitement and regret, revealed the moral confusion war inflicts on young soldiers. That tension between power and guilt would echo through his later struggles, and perhaps deepened the characters he would later bring to life. Whether exact memories or warped retellings shaped by trauma, these stories added layers to the complexity of the man who would eventually become the face of Dracula. When he returned from war in 1916, he tried to rebuild normalcy. He married Ilona Schmick in June 1917. But the foundation was already cracked: political upheaval, unresolved trauma, Disapproving families on both sides, everything pushed them apart like opposing magnets. When Hungary's communist revolution collapsed in 1919, Lugosi's political activism turned him into a marked man. He fled the country for his life. Ilona refused to leave. Their marriage ended in that refusal. By 1920, they divorced, and he stepped into exile carrying both heartbreak and the weight of a world he no longer recognized. But before the collapse, Lugosi had thrown himself completely into political revolution. During the Hungarian Soviet Republic of 1919, he became one of the most vocal supporters of Bela Kun's Communist Party, believing with genuine passion that revolution could reshape the nation into something better. On March 31, 1919, he led a massive demonstration of actors demanding reforms and fair treatment. The new government introduced progressive laws, higher wages, legal protections for minorities, the 8-hour workday. For Lugosi, these changes felt like justice finally arriving after decades of exploitation. Then he did something that would be erased from history books. He founded the first film actors union in the world. Starting in 1918 with a free organization of theatrical employees, he expanded it into the National Trade Union of Actors, uniting theater and film workers under one banner. The union held its first congress on April 17, 1919, where Lugosi spoke passionately about raising the moral, cultural, and economic standing of actors. The achievement was groundbreaking, revolutionary, historic. Hollywood would later pretend it never happened. His voice grew even louder when he began publishing radical articles. In the May 1, 1919 issue of Shineshek Lapja, he accused the former ruling class of deliberately keeping actors ignorant and vulnerable. He wrote with fire about exploitation and made an unapologetic case for viewing actors as workers deserving the same protections as any laborer. His words infuriated many, including his wife's conservative family. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. November 1919, Admiral Miklos Horthy's forces retook Budapest. The revolution ended. The White Terror began. For 2 years, thousands were imprisoned. Between 1,500 and 5,000 people were murdered. Lugosi's name appeared on execution lists. He escaped only because he ran fast enough, unlike many of his fellow organizers who were captured and killed. The Soviet Republic had lasted 133 days. When it fell, his life as a political figure ended in fear and exile. But the man himself? He kept moving forward. First Vienna, then Berlin by 1920. Berlin's thriving silent film industry drew him in like gravity. He appeared in Hypnose, The Caravan of Death, The Head of Janus, and others. He lived as a wanted man who could never return home, yet he kept acting because it was the one place where he still felt grounded. That same year, he crossed the ocean toward an uncertain future in America. He arrived in New Orleans on December 4, 1920, aboard the steamship Graf Tissa Istvan. At 38 years old, standing 6 feet 1 inch and weighing 180 pounds, he worked as a merchant sailor just to reach American shores safely. From Louisiana, he traveled north and filed his immigration papers at Ellis Island on March 23, 1921. To survive, he took grueling labor jobs that were light years removed from the prestige he once held at Hungary's National Theater. He joined New York's Hungarian immigrant community and helped form a small theater troupe performing for Hungarian-speaking audiences. Attendance was dismal. Money never stretched far enough. But he clung to hope like a drowning man clutching driftwood. December 1922, his Broadway debut in The Red Poppy. The role should have been impossible. At 40 years old, he didn't speak English, so he did something extraordinary. He memorized the entire part phonetically, treating English like a musical composition built from unfamiliar sounds. He convinced Henry Barron to take the risk of hiring him with a promise: he would work with a tutor whose salary would come from his future earnings, not Barron's money, his own. Audiences and critics praised his emotional depth, never realizing he didn't fully understand every word leaving his mouth. The performance stunned everyone and gave him the foothold he desperately needed in American theater. But his personal life continued its downward spiral. Months before that debut, in September 1921, he married Ilona von Monta, a fellow Hungarian actress he had known in Europe. Their love burned bright and collapsed even faster. He wanted a traditional marriage, her giving up acting, embracing motherhood as her sole purpose. She refused. They separated after either 14 days or 2 months, depending on whose version you believe. Attempts at reconciliation failed. She filed for divorce on November 11, 1924, accusing him of adultery and oppressive behavior. The divorce finalized on February 13, 1925. Despite the myth that followed him for decades, Lugosi mastered English by 1927. Directors and actors who worked with him during that period remembered conversing with him easily. In 1928 interviews, he discussed his craft in thoughtful detail, explaining that he first translated dialogue into Hungarian to grasp the emotional architecture, then practiced delivery in English until it resonated with American audiences. His accent remained, but his command over the language became strong enough to learn new lines within minutes on film sets. October 5, 1927, the Fulton Theater in New York City. The night everything shifted, Dracula opened, and Bela Lugosi stepped into the role of Count Dracula. The moment he appeared on stage, something electric moved through the theater, something primal and undeniable. The production ran for 261 performances, closing on May 19, 1928. The cast worked as one unified machine, with Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing and Dorothy Peterson as Lucy Seward. For Lugosi, this role lifted him out of years of struggle and obscurity, propelling him toward Hollywood, where his face and voice would soon become legendary. After waiting so long for recognition, his arrival felt like destiny finally catching up. Bela Lugosi stood at the absolute peak of his fame. Dracula had transformed him into a household name. Hollywood finally knew his face. Then came a decision that would quietly reshape the rest of his life. Universal offered him the role of Frankenstein's monster. It didn't speak. It required thick makeup that would completely erase the actor underneath. During the screen test, Lugosi's pride erupted like a volcano. He argued furiously with the makeup artist about the design, then shouted at director Robert Florey that he was a star, not a scarecrow, not a voiceless prop. He dismissed the role as something fit for a half-wit extra and walked away with his head held high. In that moment, the choice felt righteous, proud, necessary. The damage was immediate and catastrophic. Lugosi earned only $3,500 for Dracula, roughly $70,000 today. Meanwhile, Frankenstein exploded into the biggest hit of 1931, pulling in $12 million worldwide and leaving Dracula's $700,000 profit buried in the dust. The role Lugosi rejected went to Boris Karloff, a near-unknown actor who became a superstar overnight. From that point forward, their paths diverged completely, one ascending toward wealth and respect, the other spiraling toward obscurity and desperation. As the years crawled by, Lugosi kept finding himself standing in Karloff's shadow, even when his own performances were objectively superior. In The Black Cat, 1934, Lugosi carried the entire film with a complex, heroic role. Karloff didn't even appear until halfway through the story. Yet Karloff received top billing and exactly double Lugosi's salary, the pattern repeated. Again and again and again. Karloff's smart contracts and steady paychecks transformed him into a millionaire. Lugosi was already bankrupt by October 1932, scrambling for any work he could find. The frustration peaked in The Raven, 1935. Lugosi had nearly twice the screen time. He earned half the money. He was pushed into second billing. Each film chipped away at his confidence and his finances simultaneously. In 1939, Lugosi finally delivered a performance that critics and audiences couldn't ignore. In Son of Frankenstein, he created Igor, a twisted blacksmith with a broken neck and a sharp, haunting voice. The role showcased everything Lugosi could do as an actor: layered, unsettling, unforgettable. Yet even then, the spotlight refused to find him. Karloff received top billing once again for repeating the monster role, a character buried under makeup with zero dialogue, mostly reacting to Igor's commands. Everyone knew Igor was the heart of the film, but the hierarchy never changed. Lugosi remained second, no matter how brilliant his work. Fate turned viciously cruel. Lugosi finally played Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, exactly 12 years after rejecting the role that would have made him wealthy. This time, he was desperate for work. He had no power to refuse. The story followed Ghost of Frankenstein, 1942, where Igor's brain was placed inside the monster's body, leaving the creature blind. Lugosi filmed extensive dialogue scenes since the monster now possessed Igor's voice and mind. When test audiences laughed at his Hungarian accent, Universal panicked and slashed every line of dialogue. Suddenly, Lugosi was left staggering around with stiff arms extended, meant to convey blindness, but stripped of all context and explanation. On October 5, 1942, the physical toll caught up with him and he collapsed from exhaustion inside the heavy prosthetic suit. Later, he bitterly complained that the monster's yell made him feel foolish every time he performed it. The version of the film with his dialogue has never been found. Even when Lugosi tried to escape horror typecasting, the trap only tightened around his throat. White Zombie, released July 28, 1932, starred him as Murder Legendre, a voodoo master controlling the dead. The film was revolutionary, the first feature-length zombie movie ever made, shaping the genre for decades to come. It was shot in just 11 days during March 1932, mostly at night, on borrowed Universal sets with a budget around $50,000. The film made real money for an independent production. Lugosi earned only $800. Reports vary between $500 and $5,000. As the profits rolled in, regret followed. Instead of opening new doors, the role locked him even deeper into the horror cage.